welcome back NH fam, and we are back with Stand By Me episode 12 and 13 recaps. Where did we leave off? We left off with a lot of tension back at the house. In focus is Seungho and Jinwoo, where, if you recall, they had a big fight-ish kind of thing where Seungho basically was kind of mad at Jinwoo, and Jinwoo was not able to understand why. He wanted to talk it out, but Seungho didn't really want to talk at that point of time. So we are continuing over there. Jinwoo finally does try to talk out the situation with Seungho, and Seungho is still mum about the situation. And the thing that gets my goat even more, right? So, okay, Jinwoo tries to coax it out of him, and upon seeing no reaction, no input from his end, he starts, pushing out his own. He's just like, you know what, he's not speaking, so at least I'll put out my emotions, right? Clearly you are not comfortable at that point, so I'll do it right now. And then Seungho ends up getting mad about this, that you had come here to, console me, and now you are pouring out your emotions. I'm sorry, my dude. You were not being responsive in this conversation. What else is he supposed to do? I'll just ignore you like you have done to him so many times. I got so pissed with this conversation, low-key. Because he still kept on bringing Hyeyeon in the conversation. Seungho mentions Hyeyeon in between the conversation unprompted. There was no necessary need. But Seungho claims there is a need, where he even reasons it out in this episode, being it's a comparison between you two. That's why I end up saying it. I'm like, yo, dude, you can keep that comparison in your head. It does not need to come out, okay? Because that's what, both these choices are in your head. He is being genuine. Listen to him at that point rather than immediately weighing out your options. So why he ends up bringing Hyeyeon again in this conversation is basically, he feels like Hyeyeon would have handled this more tactfully, where she would have either worded it better or not put him in this situation. And in my opinion, this was just done to push Jinwoo's buttons, because my god, I don't know how Jinwoo is taking it, and he does not take it further on into this conversation, where he also snaps. So Seungho mentions that the reason that he's mad, we finally get a definitive answer, which is still not definitive in my opinion. Basically, he's just like, listen, you talk to me informally, he doesn't like using ni, if I'm not wrong, banmal or informal Korean. And another incident is where basically, if you recall, Jinwoo was helping out Heejin, so as to understand Eunchae's positioning in terms of the liking amongst the participants. So he was messaging her so that they could see how many chats she has left for the day. Seungho at that point of time was just like, oh, let me type it. And then Jinwoo was like, oh, it's okay, never mind. And he basically takes his own phone back from Seungho. He was bummed out about that, because he thought that Jinwoo was thinking that I don't want this guy snooping in my phone, which again, it's all in your head. He did not think that. Still, Jinwoo apologizes. I can't believe it. My dude, you should not be apologizing. But that aside, you know what? Clear it out, fine. Apologize from your end, because the person's clearly hurt. Jinwoo also mentions that, listen, I have been putting my all in this, okay? And I have always been accommodating, even changing my smoking habit. It's a huge step, because in the end, listen, it's this is 4 days in this show, so you're asking someone to completely change. The thing is, I'm not saying that you can't ask someone to change or be this is the reason I can't be with you, but you have not been accommodating yourself, and in the end he is asking, being if I was to fail, because in the end smoking is very hard, the habit is very hard to push out. How many times can you forgive is what he's probably looking for an answer. And that later in the episode he's just I just wanted to reach a compromising level with him, right? Because you can't expect someone to completely hard cold quit, because that's not how it works. So Jinwoo also finally says that, listen, I have always been into you, but finally my feelings have changed. And Seungho, with amazing maturity, even says that, yeah, we're not compatible, and I don't see this relationship going because this is a preview of all our fights. I'm listen, my dude. What I feel Seungho thinks is that relationships are meant to be perfect. Fights are not happening because you understand each other so well. No. Fights are bound to happen because you both are different personalities. You both are different people. So it's the compromising that makes you a relationship. That's what one fight you had, and you're already deciding, yeah, we're not perfect for each other. No, it's how you get over the fights that makes you decide that are we meant for each other or not. But the thing is, you will never end up becoming a couple with him, yes, is because you will never reach a compromising point, because it's always what's for you, not for the other person. Like, let's reach this point. But then we move on to Heejin and Eunchae, who also had their first like one-on-one proper talk with each other, and it was so refreshing to see after this like mess of a conversation. They understand each other's preferences in the sense of like they are very similar in their preferences, not the same but similar. Like Eunchae does not prefer childishness in her partners, whereas Heejin does not mind childishness per se. She finds it cute and endearing, but trying to see that same person in a romantic light ends up becoming a little tougher, you know. So you can clearly see the maturity from both ends, especially even Heejin notes, because Heejin herself is a little older, right, compared to Eunchae. But Eunchae is way more mature for her age. She is a 2004 liner. She really appreciates. In fact, she appreciates even the straightforwardness. So this is how both the conversations are going on at the same time. And then Eunchae like is all giggly after her conversation with Heejin. She talks it out with Jinwoo, and then Jinwoo also like he's happy to see her like that also, and he obviously confides in her and Heejin about his situation with Seungho. But lo and behold, plot twist, Seungho is overhearing this. I don't know how to feel about this, because honestly, if I was being talked about, I would walk away low-key. I would not want to listen to it. But I guess that's what you never want to talk directly. You always want to hear it indirectly. So man, do what you want. Where basically he was talking to both of them outside first, and you could hear it through the window, and then they came inside and were in the living room. And then they were talking in the living room, although it was in a low volume, but because he was awake, you could clearly hear everything. They thought he was asleep. Seungho ended up going downstairs in the middle of this. He could hear Jinwoo talking about his conversation with him. And see, personally, yeah, it's like, you should be like the person's privacy and all that, I agree. But when there's something on your heart, when there's something on your mind and you need to talk it out, you need advice, it's bound to happen. But the dude just walked into the living room and sat there and just made it awkward for everyone. So I don't know. Would you have done that? I don't know. I would have not done that, man. That's so awkward for everyone. What was the point of this? To be like, I'm listening to whatever you're saying. Girl. So now we shift on to the next morning. So Sujin and Hyeyeon are getting ready to head back home, and Hyeyeon is rushing to get back home because she really wants to see Seungho. And Sujin also ends up mentioning that honestly that overnight trip that they've had together, it doesn't really change her feelings towards Hyeyeon. She's still like in her lists. And back in the house, Seungho is angrier than ever because Jinwoo seems to be acting as if everything is alright. The thing is, my dude, when he's trying to talk to you, you're not talking to him back. And he's trying to be courteous and you just like shrug him off. What do you want? What do you want at this point? However, we do get a new mission in between all of this, and the new mission is very interesting, where it states that you have 4 hours for free dates and all restrictions have been lifted. As in, they can date whoever they want, and the restrictions like no genders, no nothing, restrictions on the messaging app have been lifted. As in, you can message as much as you want, but only for the next 4 hours. So Heejin and Eunchae have said like they have talked it out each other, they had a heart-to-heart, and they are pretty much into each other, so it was pretty much said between them. So Jinwoo and Seungho were in the turmoil per se, because Jinwoo wanted to talk it out with Seungho, right? And Seungho wanted to go on a date with Jinwoo and Hyeyeon. Jinwoo obviously, I hope, was to talk it out, and Hyeyeon wants to go on a date with Seungho, obviously, and that's why she's rushing to get back home. Then Eunchae wants to go on a date with Hyeyeon because he's not had a date with her so far, so it's his one chance because he's already had a date with Seungho, so his second love interest per se. So Chebe kind of wants to sit this one out, and lastly Sujin obviously wants to go on a date with Heejin. Okay, so let's start with the dates. So the dates start with Eunchae and Heejin obviously, where they have a beach date and it's like a little lunchtime near the beach, and honestly such an enjoyable date to watch, in the sense of now it's been like 12-13 episodes in, right? So that awkwardness obviously is gone, but you can clearly see the wavelengths of these two matching. It's not the honeymoon phase basically. They are interested in each other genuinely as people, and it was so refreshing to see that. And it honestly, because I really like Heejin as a love interest per se, so it was so nice to see her like putting so much effort. Like she was becoming like really talkative. So side note, there is like a drive kind of thing in their phones where they can upload the pictures and all the members can see it, right? So she mentioned that I'm going to take a picture for the first time for this date because like this is a very memorable date for me and I really liked it. So that's very notable. So over here, Heejin and Eunchae really end up bonding in terms of interest, where both of them really have a similar taste in music and movies. And Heejin also mentioned how she likes people who read a lot because you can have in-depth conversations with them rather than like these shallow level conversations. And Eunchae is literally the perfect fit for her because as we saw in Hyeyeon's date, she really likes introspective and deep thinking questions. I'm going to give a disclaimer. I don't know how the dates were chosen. Technically, who said yes, when, what, why. Technically, Soojin and Hyeyeon were like, I don't know how far away from the like villa per se because they had to rush to get back. But the thing is, I don't know why they couldn't ask their dates via text. Because technically Hyeyeon wanted to ask Seungho on a date and she was literally rushing to get back inside. She literally was climbing upstairs and rushing to get to the room with Seungho, but everyone else was there. So I don't know what were the restrictions in that way because there were no restrictions, right? So the weirdest thing of Youngkyo ended up going on a date with Hyeyeon. So I don't know what happened over there. Over here, honestly, in this date, right, Hyeyeon ended up taking the role of Soojin in their previous date, where she thought it was basically a recon mission, where she thought Youngkyo thought of her as like a rival to like, Seungho per se. So the most important part of this date was honestly Youngkyo's like direct confession towards Hyeyeon, being like, listen, you are a love interest for me and I like you. And it did become a little overwhelming for Hyeyeon. So next, which is even weirder in my opinion, was Seungho and Chebe. I really did not expect this pairing, and the reason it happened is basically Seungho was interested in Chebe. No, you're not. I feel like he just didn't want to confront his own feelings and confront having to make a choice between these two, so he just ended up going with Chebe. Obviously, Chebe does take it as a recon mission because if you recall, Seungho went on a date with Youngkyo last time and sees him as competition. So yeah. So honestly, nothing much really happened in this date. It was basically like Chebe asking Seungho about, how the date was, how Youngkyo was, comparing him per se. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Lastly, on the weirdest dates is Soojin and Jinwoo. But it was honestly not weird because Soojin is already, she mentioned in the beginning only that, listen, I have not talked to you per se, and honestly you are a very nice person. I've only talked to you 5 minutes per se. So I just wanted to get to know you more as a person, which was really nice to see because you could clearly see in their voice, eyes, intentions that this was just meant to, get to know him better. Because he comes across as a nice person. So through these conversations, you kind of get to know that they're in the same boat in terms of their first love interest. Because for Soojin, her interest is decreasing, not because her emotions are decreasing. It is more like she is understanding that Heejin is just not that into her. And then, we know the entire situationship with Jinwoo. We get Jinwoo pouring out all his troubles towards Soojin in their date, and Seungho pouring out all his troubles towards Chebe in there. And that's how all the dates end. No sub dates happen per se. It is only these dates. And that's how we move on to the next mission, which is a pool party. That's right, we have got a pool party episode. So the highlight is what I'd like to say is Youngkyo tries to get closer with Hyeyeon, where he plays around with her per se, and obviously Hyeyeon is oblivious to it because doesn't really see him as a love interest. And then there is also a moment between Seungho and Hyeyeon where Seungho ends up slipping in the pool and he wears contact lenses, so obviously it got shifted around because of that. So immediately she ran to get a towel and some eye drops to help him out, which creates a moment. And obviously Jinwoo is not happy. He is a little perturbed, but he's still a nice person where he doesn't he says that I'm not going to push her away. So the pool party happens, they dry off and they start having some food, and they get a new mission being like, here are some games to play, and the games to play is basically the king game. So the king game, for those who don't know, is basically So chits are put in a box by the members themselves where they write like dares to do. And they put it in a box, they're like sticks. And on one of them, like either a crown symbol or the king word is written or whatever, it's selected. And basically whoever picks that stick becomes the king for that round. And for 5 minutes, he can order his subjects to do anything. So basically, like they put on the slips and they tell the person what to do. And in case you reject the order, you have to drink. It's a drinking game. Obviously, tensions are bound to rise, especially between the love triangle that is Hyeyeon, Seungho and Jinwoo, where Jinwoo was asked to kiss the hand and pat the head of his first same-sex love interest, which is Seungho. At that moment he ended up doing. Then Seungho was asked to back hug his first love interest, which he ended up doing for Jinwoo. And then Hyeyeon was ordered to interlock hands with her love interest for 10 seconds and to whisper something in the ear for 10 seconds, which is obviously Seungho. And she ends up saying, don't just look at Jinwoo, please do give me also a chance. Then Eunchae also openly ends up confessing to Hyeyeon because of one of the orders. However, physical moments also end up happening between Eunchae and Chae with a 10-second hug, then Chae kissing his first choice, and lastly, Eunchae having to give Chae a piggyback ride around the pool. Heejin and Eunchae also have their sweet moments where they are dared to hold each other's hand for 10 seconds and to play the pepper game, which they did fairly well. However, we do notice that Soojin is looking a little bummed. My girl, stay strong. But yeah, she's obviously a little perturbed and she does in fact get dared towards her love interest, but she didn't want to put a burden on Heejin, so she ended up drinking. And even Heejin knows that Soojin is into her. So even Heejin understood that Soojin probably did it to, look out for her. So to ease her heart a little bit, in the next round, Heejin is there to hold the hand of her second love interest and she ends up holding Soojin's hand, which also takes Soojin by surprise because she thought that she was completely out of Heejin's ranks. And they finally get the end of day mission, which they always do get, that is who caught your eyes by the end of the day. So we shift to the participants basically talking to each other in general, and we get Heejin and Soojin clearing out a misunderstanding. So Soojin had the misunderstanding that Heejin was probably not that into her after her date and about liking her in general because of a misunderstanding in the conversation that they had in the car. And Heejin cleared that out, being like, that's not really it, honestly. You are a nice person, you are cute, but honestly, I see you more as a younger sister than a love interest. And they continue having this conversation, however, they are cut short because of dinner plans and, they have to converge in the living room. So, Heejin and Soojin do promise to continue this conversation further on. So during dinner, we get to see that Seungho voted for Hyeyeon, Hyeyeon voted for Seungho, Chae voted for Eunchae, Eunchae voted for Hyeyeon, Heejin voted for Eunchae, Eunchae voted for Heejin, Soojin voted for Heejin, and Jinwoo voted for Seungho. So Seungho, Heejin and Hyeyeon ultimately tied for first rank. So usually the person with the highest votes gets to, go to the secret room with their person of their choice or their mutual. However, since Hyeyeon and Seungho have already gone to the secret room, Heejin was given the preference towards the secret room and she could choose between the two people who voted for her, that is Soojin and Eunchae, which she ends up choosing Eunchae, which was bound to happen. And I have never cried. I've never been so bittersweet because honestly speaking, right, Eunchae is probably a really good fit for her, like a better fit than Soojin. And I understand, emotionally and maturity wise, they are much more on a wavelength, similar wavelength. And especially with Heejin slightly clearing things out, but I'm still broken from inside. But yeah. So Eunchae and Heejin continue on to the secret room where they honestly just talk about their previous relationships, what they like in each other. Eunchae even mentions where she prefers a low maintenance kind of partner, that she doesn't like a person who constantly updates her on everything, like I have eaten lunch, I have reached home, I have eaten dinner, I have done this, I have climbed the metro. So honestly, even I can sympathize with her because I am her. Even Heejin mentioned how basically she is happy. First of all, she didn't expect to get the secret room in general, so she's happy she got it at this stage in show, because that sense of awkwardness, they've gone past it, where they're comfortable talking to each other about real things rather than surface level things, which is good for them only because they are that kind of people. But then we move on to
Soojin and Jinwoo. Basically, Soojin kind of advises Jinwoo on what to do with Seungho because she kind of had a brief talk with Seungho where she kind of pushes him to double down on quitting smoking. However, Jinwoo is also kind of like turned off by Seungho because of how, like he takes him for granted, and of course the constant mentioning of Hyeyeon and everything. Basically, Seungho expects Jinwoo to do such major changes like this quitting of like the quit smoking thing, which again, it is a good habit. Yes, you can't expect someone to go cold turkey. You need to give them chances. I agree on that. So, and he himself barely, like the small things, he does not make changes. For example, Jinwoo had told him, being like, Hyeyeon, whenever you mention Hyeyeon, I don't like it. Why are you bringing up her name in this conversation? And he's just like, oh, because it's a comparison in the end. Listen, it's a two-way street. He is voicing out his troubles. Listen to him and be like, I'm sorry. Every time he is apologizing towards you. You are never doing that. So then Soojin advises Jinwoo to make one last attempt and go full in, do everything what he wants to, and even after that, there's no change. Then, as much as his heart denies it, you have to let go of Seungho. Basically, it was a thing of put your heart into it, put your all into it, so that you don't have any regrets later on. At least, like if you look back on this, you'd be like, I gave it my all, but he was the one who was not ready to change or anything. And next we shift to Hyeyeon and Seungho having a chat, where basically Seungho is just dumping all his frustrations on Hyeyeon. And this was the biggest turn off for me for both Seungho and Hyeyeon, because my god, the immaturity, whatever he was putting forward, I'm just like, my dude, if you have one clear conversation about it, you will understand, but you are not ready to have a conversation. Whenever he tries to bring it up, you don't like want to talk. And then later on in his conversation with Hyeyeon, he's like, honestly, I will not confront him about it. I will not talk about it. If he talks about it to me, then it's fine. Because again, the world revolves around you, doesn't it? It's like, you are not trying. Even you are absolutely not trying. He wants the best of both worlds because Jinwoo is his ideal type in terms of like, the caring nature and going out of the way to like, pay attention to the partner. Whereas Hyeyeon meets his external criteria, basically the smoking thing. Like she doesn't smoke, and external, like they have fun. That's why he constantly brings Hyeyeon, being like, it's basically a defense mechanism, it's a coping mechanism where he doesn't want to go with Hyeyeon. But like basically, can you not just be like her? Is what is going on in his head. Him not talking it out is just him trying to get, in my opinion, any reason to dislike Jinwoo so that he doesn't go fully in on it. And honestly speaking, spilling your guts to the person who is notably your second love interest and who likes it, and you are her first love interest, was certainly a choice, because obviously she is going to be like your yes man essentially, and that's what you want. You want a yes man in the end. That's what she externally fits his criteria, where obviously, and what got my vote even more in the interview, like in between the cut, there were interview cuts also of her, right? So she was just like, oh, I wouldn't rank Jinwoo, in this conversation. And then she immediately proceeds to do so, because obviously you will say things that it's in your favor, so that like Jinwoo and him don't date. However, even after this, Jinwoo ends up apologizing to you, like, for anything that I've said to upset you, anything I've done, I am so sorry about it. And my dude is like half asleep essentially. I don't know, that's what, like, you do not want to have a serious conversation ever, but other people need to be attentive, listening to you, actively listening to you when your problems are being talked about. But yeah, this was a beautiful juxtaposition between these two talks, why one was actual supportive maturity. We even get Jinwoo and Soojin like bonding, and because they're in the same boat, and like even like crying a little because of the helplessness that you don't know what to do. Like, you want to be with that person, but you want to also like see them happy. That is for Soojin's case, whereas Seungho, you don't know what to do per se in general. So yeah, so then we move on and we get to know they have got new missions, that is a replay mission. Basically, they have the opportunity to go back in time per se and to choose one date with the person that they wish to do over again. The only restriction being they cannot go on a date with a matched pair. So matched pair is basically where both sides have voted for each other. So it's Heejin and Eunchae and Seungho and Hyeyeon. So these two cannot vote for each other. That is the only restriction. And that is how we cut this episode. And I am so pissed in the sense of I cannot stand Seungho and Hyeyeon, especially the cattiness and like picky nature from Hyeyeon. I don't know, because personally, if a person is like torn, just saying yes to everything he says will not help your case, because you're not understanding the base problem over here. You're just like, yes, whatever you're saying is right, because you will not have conversations later. And that's what the reason that Seungho is leaning towards Hyeyeon is because they've never had a conversation. They've never had an actual in-depth conversation, and they've never, with all due respect, they've not had a fight, because I can sense, although like there's only one episode left, right? I don't know if the fight's ever going to come. Honestly, I see them walking out as a couple, yes, but will it last post the show? Absolutely not. That is my thoughts. Heejin and Eunchae, they honestly, I really do hope they walk out as a couple. And I do wish them like the best for the future. Although my girl Suhin, you deserve the best. You are the sweetest. And even Chebe, do let us know your thoughts on this episode and who you got angriest at, because I know they made you angry. There's no way that they didn't make you angry. But yeah, I know you have emotions. Leave them down in the comments. But yeah, do like, share, and subscribe to the NamaSTAY YouTube channel. And we'll see you all in the next and final one. Annyeong!